Blianava Ur, Happy New Year, everybody. It's day 1 of 2023, according to the Roman calendar, and day 10 of the 12 days of Celtic mythology, according to me. So in this series, we've been working our way through a story called The Adventures of Art, Son of Conn. Every day, I tell a bit more of the story and then use it to talk about different aspects of Celtic myth. In case that makes the story too disjointed for you, I've put links to where you can read the story or hear me telling it in one go. And you'll find those links in the description below the video. If you've been enjoying this series, then you'll probably appreciate that it doesn't just happen by magic. The fact is, I haven't done much else but do research and write my little talks and find you lots of nice links for further reading these past 10 days. I'm not complaining, I love doing it, but no one other than possibly you is paying me. I don't make any money at all from the ads that YouTube might be showing you. So put your hand in your digital pocket if you can and send me whatever feels fair to you by donating on Ko-fi or even becoming a patron. And a big thank you to all the people who have donated and become patrons since I started this series. You know who you are. You're the people keeping the wolf from my door. So in our story so far, a king called Conn has forced an otherworldly woman called Beikva to marry him, even though she was in love with his son, who's called Art. Strangely, when Conn and Beikva met, she told Conn that her name was Delvkive, the daughter of Morgan, and their marriage has brought nothing but trouble to Conn's kingdom. Now Beikva has sent Art, the son, on a quest to find Delvkive, the woman she originally claimed to be. I'll tell you, it's a tangled old mess. Art is now in the other world looking for Delvkive, where it's just been prophesied that he's about to have a lot of trouble. So let's see how he gets on. Just as it was foretold, Art faced many dangers. As his coracle was tossed by mountainous waves, the monsters of the deep crowded around his tiny vessel, peering over the gunwales and threatening him. With difficulty, Art donned his armor and he gave them battle, slaughtering many until the rest fled. Once on land, he came to the forest inhabited by wild dogs and the wicked, perverse hags who pierced and hacked at him with strange weapons until he finally prevailed over them. He climbed a mountain of ice, so slippery that for every step he advanced, he seemed to slip down 10. Exhausted, he finally found his way into a forested glen, but it was full of venomous toads, which spat their poison at Art as he hurried past. He came to another mountain where he slew a long-maned lion which barred his way. He then found himself at a narrow bridge spanning a great torrent, and there he met a filthy giant wielding a pillar stone. Art overcame this giant only to be faced with the great black-toothed warrior he had been warned about. No weapon in the world would harm him. Art grabbed the giant by the ankle and heaved him over the edge of the ravine and made it safely across. In the distance, Art could see the castle of Morgan, the magician. He saw how Delvkive was imprisoned in a tower atop a high pillar. He could see her there. She was very beautiful, with golden hair falling down over her long, green, silken cloak, all of one color, which was partly covering a red satin smock, same color as her round red lips. Well, somehow I suspect that Art's troubles are not over, but we'll have to find out how things go for him tomorrow. Did you notice Delvkive's outfit? Where have we seen that before? The text seems to be a bit garbled in the Book of Fermoy. At this point, and you may have noticed, Art faces quite a few more dangers than Kredja warned him about yesterday, black-maned lions and extra giants and all sorts of things, toads spitting venom. Wow. And giant toads at that. And Creja warned him about some things yesterday, but not about these things. Maybe the poor scribe was just running low on space to fit it all in. So I'm afraid that action adventures are not really my favorite part of Celtic myth, even though telling them it's kind of fun. Other aspects interest me more, and there's not really much to say about Art's adventure today, except that he's very courageous and an excellent fighter. So I want to talk about one of the repeated motifs in the story. I touched on this a bit in day 2, but I think it's time to take a deeper look at it. And that's the use of the beach, a liminal space, as a point where exchanges between the other world and the mortal world can take place, or where beings from one world can access the other. And it's also, I think, a place where change is effected in the characters as well, in a literary sense, and maybe in a spiritual sense. Liminal space, however we find that or create it, is where we effect change in ourselves. So I'm going to be posing a few questions over the next few minutes. Give these questions some thought over the next day or two. Maybe do a little journaling or something if you're that way inclined. This will help you understand the story. So you might want to have a pen handy to jot down some of these questions. I'm not going to start asking them immediately, so you've got time to grab that pen if you need to. So when I say that this will help you understand the story, I don't mean that there's only one correct interpretation of the story. I'm aware of at least 2 interpretations that I have. And I don't think my 2 interpretations are necessarily even in conflict with each other. So over the next few sessions, I'll try to unpeel my interpretations slowly for you, so that you can make up your own mind about what your interpretation is. You might spot things that I've never thought about. My students often do that. So this will all make a more lasting impression on you and do you more good. You know, it's New Year, we've got to do ourselves some good, right? So if we take it slowly, I think it will have a better effect. Early in the story, Con goes to the beach, hoping to get a grip on himself. And who knows what fate or instinct drew him there. Since he's there, he meets Bekova right away. Her coracle just happens to come to land where he is. Quite a coincidence. Now, I've been fairly judgmental in my tone when talking about Con's response to Bekova. But I think it often happens that when we mortals go to liminal space, whether that's the water's edge or meditation or getting out the tarot cards, we get an answer, but we misinterpret the answer. And sometimes we misinterpret it kind of intentionally, whether that's conscious or unconscious, because we don't like what it's telling us. And I think that's exactly what happens to Con. So here's a question. Here's one of the questions. I will review the questions at the end. What do you think the message for Con really was that day when he went to the beach? What was the other world offering Con? But what about Bekova's viewpoint? If I'm a bit hard on Con, the medieval storyteller is very hard on Bekova. She's been unfaithful, so she must be punished, he tells us. If Bekova's trip to the other world of mortals is a punishment or a banishment, what help or answers might she gain by crossing through the liminal veil of the beach? Who might she become if she's given the chance to reinvent herself? So that's another question. Unless an earlier text of this story is found someday, we'll never know whether there was originally a different reason for Beikova setting sail. It wouldn't surprise me. Could she really be more like a fairy bride? Possibly. But if so, is she meant for Con, the king, or for his son, Art? So there's another question. And later in the story, Con heads for the beach a second time in search of his sacrificial victim. Now, I used the analogy a moment ago of intentionally misinterpreting or disregarding a tarot reading. As someone who reads oracle cards for people, it's interesting. I notice how often people will do this, or how they'll come back for a second reading or approach somebody else for a reading, hoping that eventually they'll get the answer they want. This is especially true where romance is involved. But all forms of fortune telling aside, there's always a danger in trying to build something on the shaky foundation of falsehood or folly. So throughout the series, we've focused on Beikova's falsehood to Con. She gives him a name. She identifies herself by a name that seems to belong to somebody else. Can you think of an interpretation of her actions which is more positive than just thinking of her as a liar? So there's another question. To be fair to Con, he's perfectly honest with Beikova, but are his actions those of a wise king? Is he deluding himself about something? If so, what's he deluding himself about? What are the falsehoods he's telling himself? And then later, Con crosses into the other world, seeking the boy. And we've already discussed his dishonesty there. And then he comes back to Ireland, crossing the Veil again, bringing Shegda with him into the mortal world. When Con first returns to Ireland, did you notice that his behavior improves temporarily? Can you remember what that improvement was in his behavior? And then finally, we see Art setting off from the beach. Okay, he's under a gesh to do so, but what do you think Art will gain by crossing that divide over into the other world? What will he gain if he finds Delvkive? And what will Beikova gain if Art finds Delvkive? More questions. So I've been throwing a lot of questions out. So just let me summarize those questions a bit for you. I hope you'll think about some of these questions over the next days. So these were the questions I asked you, and I'll just try and recap a little and explain what I mean by them. So what do you think the true message, in inverted commas, was for Con when he met Beikova on the beach at the beginning of the story? Did she bring some important truth with her for Con? And how might Beikova have transformed herself had she not been intercepted by Con? If Con hadn't been on that beach when Beikova arrived, who might she have become? And if Beikova was more like a fairy bride, if you remember the fairy brides back in some of the early sessions we talked about, how would the story look different? If she was coming to bring sovereignty, to bring abundance to Ireland, to its king or its ruler, if she was a fairy bride, would she be Gon's bride or would she be Art's? And some more questions. Could there be a positive reason for Beikova calling herself Delvkive? Is it a lie or is it a truth? And what falsehoods or intentional misinterpretation might Con be trying to build upon? What's the lie he's maybe telling himself there on that beach when he meets Beikva? And when Con comes back from his own trip to the other world, can you remember how his behavior improves temporarily when he first comes back with Shagda? Now, as we move into the part of the story we're in now, what will Art gain if he finds Delvkive? Beikva's put him under a gesh to find Delvkive. Delvkive being the name of the woman that Beikva originally said she was. Now she's sent Art to find this woman. What will Art get out of this? And what will Beikva gain if Art finds Delvkive? Because she's the one who sent him. A lot to think about. I'll just leave that screen up for a moment longer in case anyone is scribbling furiously. So I'd love it if you think about some of these questions over the next couple of days. When we get to day 12, I promise to try to lay my own theories out very clearly for you. But I think you'll gain at least as much by forming your own theories. So thanks very much for listening, and don't forget to check out my online classes. So I'll see you tomorrow. And once again, Happy New Year.